Diana Ennis with the Heartland Song Network, and I'm honored and privileged today to be talking to Jackie Myers, who is our Artist of the Month for July 2024. She is a jazz artist that's based now here in Kansas City. And thank you for doing this today and welcome.
Hi, Diana. Thank you. Happy to be
Um,
here.
I I know that you went to the conservatory here and have a certificate from Berkeley and have this music education background, kind of a general music education background. At what time did you decide that that was the path you were going to take with your education, and why jazz?
Good questions. I was in college at the time. I had gone to study science, actually. And I think I was in about my second year, and I was really drawn towards the bands, like really drawn, like couldn't leave the practice room. Didn't, and I remember like a particular moment. I was hanging out with these musicians who were going across campus, and I just happened to look over at the science building, and there was one of my classmates at the board, and it was filled with equations, and I was not there, and I did not want to be there. I wanted to go play music. And so yeah, eventually I stopped fighting it and I just switched my major. And as for jazz, I grew up in DC originally, and that city, I mean, it's not really known as like it's not like a New York or a Chicago or an LA, but there's still a pretty strong jazz scene. And my dad was a big jazz fan. And he would take me to there's a jazz concert series at the Kennedy Center. A lot of it's free actually. And he would take me to those. And he'd also take me to Blues Alley, which is a famous jazz venue in that town. And he had this great vinyl collection. And I think, I didn't start out super into jazz, but I think that sort of just like created the foundation of my interest there.
Well, from the standpoint of someone who's not a musician and doesn't have that bent, I it seems to me that jazz, well, all music really is so mathematically based, based on mathematics, that if you had a predisposition for science or math, that jazz would be the music that you would gravitate to because it seems difficult and cerebral to me. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's because I grew up on rock and roll and R&B and pop music, and just really wasn't exposed to jazz until much later in my life. And I'm coming to appreciate it more and more. So you recounting that, college experience doesn't really surprise me now that you turned to jazz, because with a science and math background, why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? Blues Alley, gosh, I think one of my favorite albums of all time was recorded live there. Eva Cassidy, live at
Oh
Blues
yeah.
Alley.
Yep. I know
Live
the
at
album. I
Bluesy.
know the artist. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, she's one of my top five vocalists, and she could sing any genre of music, especially jazz. I did not know that Blues Alley was known as a jazz club, so thank you for enlightening me on that. Um, I was watching an interview that you did on another podcast, and you mentioned that you might be considering getting a PhD. If that's true, what does that look like? What would the PhD be in? What would that likely take from a time standpoint, and where would you get it?
Yeah. I mean, those are great questions. And I think that if the situation presented itself, I would jump at that chance. Right now, I mean, we were just talking before the interview about my schedule. My schedule is kind of insane. I would have to make a lot of changes in order to allow for that to happen. Um, that doesn't mean it's out of the question. I don't. It would have to be local because my entire career is here, so probably either Kansas or Missouri. Um, and and yeah, the reason I would want to go back is just because I really enjoy continuing education. For me, it's a wonderful way to stay in touch with the excitement of learning music. There's something about like playing gig after gig where it's just like that's the grind. And I super enjoy performing. But there's something great about being like, I had no idea that was true. Like in grad school, I learned about some microtonal theory. And I just had never really considered the possibility of anything but the notes and the scales that I'm familiar with.
Is that
And
like the
here,
notes between the notes or
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And like, I mean, to make a simple example, like Indian music has scales that have way more than 12 tones in them. And there's a Bulgarian music does too. And we're starting to see people use microtones in this country more and more. uh I'm at a point in my career where it's just like, how am I learning that there are new notes? Like, how is that even possible? And that to me is so exciting. And if I could continue along that path and have more brain explosions, I would do that for sure. I love playing, but relearning that love of something new is yeah, will always call to me.
I think I think that is a wonderful attitude or outlook to have, because one of the frustrations that I have with folks in my own generation is that they get locked in to or stay in the same groove or um, in the same bailiwick of music. They don't get past the 60s and 70s rock era. They don't open themselves
Right.
to playing anything else, listening to anything else, experiencing anything else. And I don't understand. I don't understand that. I've been so fortunate to discover so many forms of music through participation in Ensemble Iberica and their patron trips overseas, and the organization or the performances that they present here in Kansas City with music from the Iberian Peninsula and South America and Central America. There's a whole other world of music out there, besides Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, whom I love. I mean, I really do like them. But how lucky are we to have the conservatory of music that we do have here in the Heartland? Is it as extraordinary as I perceive it to be?
I mean, I think there needs to be a few more on that list. I loved UMKC and I got a ton out of it, but right now JCCC is that's a community college. There are some really promising young musicians coming out of that program right now. And then also KU. KU was in Downbeat a couple years in a row. So it's there's a and I think with a community filled with educational possibilities like that, you have a stronger music scene. Like, it can't just rest on one school to
Right,
carry that
right.
over.
Yeah,
So,
I appreciate that. That gives me some idea. I mean, we've highlighted Brandon Draper as an artist of the month from KU. I don't know that we've really had JCC on our radar, so definitely we'll look into how we may be of service or be of interest there at JCC. Um, I'd like to talk to you also about collaboration. Jazz music and the jazz community here in Kansas City, to me, seems to be so collaborative in nature. And not only kind of it seems easy so, but I'm always amazed when you guys sit down and maybe never have played together before, and you just
right.
jam. And I mean, like, how it's just amazing to me. I don't know how you just don't stumble all over each other and and then it just sounds like a cacophony, and it doesn't to me. Um, do you like to collaborate? Does it come easily to you? What's your take on collaboration, not only from performing, but for creating, producing?
Well, in the jazz genre, part of our job is to know a lot of jazz standards. So, off the cuff, we should already know a lot of songs. And so, if you're doing your job right, you can show up to any situation, and you and the others should have enough shared standards that you know that you're not really starting from scratch. You're basing it off of knowledge that you all have from the study of jazz, from the community, from the vernacular of the genre. And that's, to me, that's one of the more beautiful parts about that music. Blues is kind of like that too. There are a lot of blues standards. I work for an artist named Nick Schneblin. I think Nick could probably play different blues standards that he has not written, that he's learned over time, for like 3 to 4 hours.
Right.
And all of those blues songs, even though we're familiar with blues having like a set number of chords, they're all a little bit different. And the jazz musicians are the same. Most of us can play 3 or 4 hours of music together.
That's just fascinating to me. But now that I think about it, I know a lot of bluegrass players that can do that too. There's a lot of
Right.
standard, trad tunes from Appalachia or the Doc Watson era where they all know those tunes and they can be around a campfire somewhere at a festival and play for 3 or 4 hours um, because of the standards that are there. So I guess that does make sense. I was lucky enough one night to tag along with a jazz musician who was actually an airline pilot, but he was in Kansas City for a short period of time and he had his guitar with him. And we took him to the Blue Room and we took him to the Musicians Foundation, late at night, and we took him
Yeah.
somewhere else. And it was just amazing to me how he could just jump right in with these players here in Kansas City that play all the time. And it just seems so effortless. But that's to me the untrained ear. But now that you've explained that there are standards and that for those of you that gig on a regular basis, there's about a 3 or 4 hour head start that you all have, if you need it. Um,
Right.
when you're in the studio, recording your own music or working on a project that's original music, are you are you are you democratic or how does that work?
It depends on what we're talking about in terms of recording. Um, the songs, sometimes it's a good thing to be democratic in writing them. Sometimes that just gives a lot more work to people that already have full lives and want to write their own songs and have their own bands. So I think feeling that out and like understanding how the different people want to participate is part of being a good collaborator. You don't want to ask for more than people want to give because they're already helping you make your music, which is such a wonderful way for them to share their craft, but they're doing it under your name and for you. So you have to have respect for that and not ask too much. That being said, like the rhythm section that I'm working with right now, Matt Leifer and Seth Lee, um, I really like collaborating with them because they will practice. Jazz musicians, we know so many tunes that it's kind of hard to get a rehearsal in. Usually you just show up at the gig and you're playing, and that's cool. But when you're doing original compositions, depending on who you're working with, an outside perspective can be very helpful. So, for example, we had a tune, Just Past the Waves, that we just recorded. And Matt Leifer, the drummer, had this alternative ending for one of the sections. And he was like, why don't you add 2 bars here? And I would have never thought of that. And at the time I was like, that's going to make it an uneven amount of bars. Why would we? And then we tried it. And I definitely did it democratically because I was so used to the old version that it sounded weird to me. And then I asked everybody else what they thought. And resoundingly, everybody was like, the 2 extra bars are cool. So we did it. And I mean, it was such a nice contribution that he had. But asking folks to contribute any more than that sometimes is just like asking too much. You're making the album, so at least bring them a song to work with, you know?
Right, right. I always wonder, I mean, I've been in the studio on several recording sessions on different genres of music, and it seems to be one of two things, that the people are using that studio time to rehearse almost and kind of figure things out, or they come to the studio completely prepared. They've already rehearsed, outside of the recording studio and just hit the ground kind of running and get it down because, it's expensive not only to book the studio, but everybody's time is precious.
Right, right.
So when you go in the studio, do you rehearse ahead of time? Or what's your process when you're actually in the studio to record and the clock is running? Or the meter
Sure,
is running, I should say.
sure. A couple points to say on that one. Um, like when we watch stories of bands that we love, right? Like biopics of like wonderful bands that we see them like hang out in a studio in the countryside for
Right,
weeks and they write together and they have these breakthrough moments. That was at a time when record labels and studios, oftentimes the record labels owned the studios. Those record labels weren't these giant corporate entities that we're used to now. Like they're not named Sony, right? Like I mean, I'm wearing the shirt of one, Sun, right?
Right, right, right.
So everything was organized a lot differently, and there was a product to sell that allowed these labels to stay alive and select artists and gave the artist the time in the studio to do things like collaborate and write together. um Times are very, very different now, right? Like a lot of, you have the whole like kind of 1% thing. You have people that are selling out stadiums like Taylor Swift, and then there's a long way down to us
Right.
folks that are playing like we're scene players, we're playing every night. And for us, there's no way we could really afford the studio as a place to write and practice together. That doesn't mean that's a bad way to do that. If somebody can afford that, that's wonderful. Any way that you can be creative, you you should be. And everyone has different ways of expressing themselves and being creative. For me in particular, I went with the like, let's be as organized as possible so that there's the least stress available. Like I wanted to reduce stress and let everybody concentrate on what they were doing in the studio. So the way that we did it is we did section rehearsals. I had strings, and actually they came here and we rehearsed our parts. And I had parts out several weeks before we went into the studio. I had a horns rehearsal, string rehearsal, and rhythm rehearsal. And then by the time we were in the studio, everyone had played those songs multiple times and seen the parts. So there was we definitely didn't need to rehearse there. There were different takes. We would go through a take and it'd be okay and we do it
Right.
again.
Do you,
But definitely not.
do you find that the first take is usually the best?
Um, I don't, it depends on the song. I do think that there's some logic to you can't, if you just keep doing it over and over again, it starts to lose
Right.
organic energy. And so like your fifth take is pretty much useless. Somewhere in that like 1 to 3, 1, 2, and 3 takes, that's where the magic happens. And if you push it too long, it kind of goes. And I did that with one song. I like really wanted to feel magic in this one song, and I kept doing it over and over again. And the band was like, we have to stop.
Pull the plug on it. Pull the plug on it, please. If you're comfortable in sharing it, where do you, or where are you going to record, or where are you recording your next project?
So we've actually already recorded. We recorded at BRC Studios in June. Um, yeah.
And do you have a timetable set up for when that's going to be released and how you're going to release it?
Yes and no. I have some vague ideas of how to do that. I've contacted some local venues. I am choosing between 3, and they're also deciding whether or not that interests them. And I think there's a lot that happens after recording. You have to edit, you have to mix, you have to master, and then you have to figure out a PR plan.
Right.
Because now, I mean, anyone can I could record an album in here and drop it tomorrow, but then what happens? Like
Right.
there's
Right.
so many songs out there and there's so many streaming networks that you kind of like drop work into a void. And I would like to not do that if possible. So I'd like to find the right PR opportunities, and kind of roll out the album single by single and all that. So probably early next year is what we're looking at.
It's difficult to determine if there's any rules anymore, or what the plan is. I mean, I've been on the air now on the radio for almost 15 years, and the way that music comes to me is so different than it was 15 years ago. And the way music is released, it's a single at a time, and it's a single every 3 weeks if they've got an EP, or it just comes out in dribs and drabs, and it's so that there's just this constant pipeline of information coming at us at radio all the time, and it's a lot different now, than it was. So I can see why it would be problematic for an artist to determine what's the best way to get this out, and what's the timing. And there's lots of valleys and mountaintops in that process. um, I'd like to talk to you about mentorship before we go. I feel like that the over the years, all the folks that I've talked to, they have that one person in their life or 2 people along the way that really made a difference for them. Have you had mentors like that, and who might they be?
Oh yeah. In college it was Gabrielle Espinoza. Um, and I had a great band director, a jazz band director, Brent Sandy. But Mr. Espinoza, I mean, I was kind of, I was like, why do we ever even need to write music down? You know, like I had all these like wild ideas, and I was both sure of myself and very insecure all at the same time. I don't know how that's possible, but you know, when you're
Oh, it's
19,
called youth.
yeah, right. And and he was so patient with me. I mean, he like that specific conversation that I just referenced really happened. And he talked to me for like an hour and a half about music notation and why it's necessary and when it isn't. And he just patiently answered all of my questions. And my technique was like all over the place. I didn't know anything about Latin jazz. And he would just sit with me and like show me these like very basic things, and he got through to what then was a difficult kid to get through to, and he made a huge impression on me. I would
Does
say like you. Hmm?
does he know that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're still in touch.
Good,
um,
good, good.
and then more recently, Bobby Watson, I would say.
Mm,
um, and I'd feel odd saying that if I hadn't heard him say it, but we both, I think, feel that way. And I think a lot of people share the same experience that I did with him. Like he is someone that inspires you and he brings you up. You know, there's a lot of players out there that are amazingly skilled, and they have this choice. Are they going to like all tides bring up the boats, or are they going to kind of like decide that that's their territory and you have to be invited?
right,
And
right,
he's
right.
the first of those. Like he will make anybody in the room feel like anything is possible. Like truly. And I think that's true of most people he's worked with, definitely for me. And I was really excited. Like he recorded with me on this album,
Wow.
and it was like one of the honors of my life
Oh,
to.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Do you see yourself as a teacher or a mentor? Are you mentoring anyone else? Do you teach at all, or
I
is
seldom
is that
teach private lessons. I don't really enjoy it as much as I just don't. A lot of times, like I've had experiences where there might be a student that doesn't actually even want to be there. It's
right?
just that the parents think that this is a really enriching activity, and it feels more like babysitting than anything else. And for me, like I care about this more than anything. And it seems like a waste of my time and that person's time. Like just because they're a child doesn't mean you can respect their opinions and what they would like to do. And I do have one student right now, and he's doing really well. He has a unique passion for music. I don't care like if they're unbelievably great at playing, but I do care if they're passionate about it and if they want to work at it. I don't really even believe in talent. I think that everyone can develop something, and that everyone has something to develop. And my one student, he has always given 110%. So I've worked with him for years. And the other program I work with is Kansas City Jazz Orchestra has an outreach program called KCJO Jazz Works. And they send small groups into schools and summer programs. And our job is to show the youth of Kansas City what Kansas City jazz is, and talk to them and then play for them. And that's been super rewarding because a lot of the youth, you know, we said, do you know that Kansas City is famous for jazz? And oftentimes they don't know. And we're like, you can take pride in the jazz in Kansas City like you can take pride in the Chiefs. It's that big of a deal. And they kind of light up. And we talk to them about what I just talked to you about, that we have standards in common and that we've never played before. And look at this, we can do this anyway. And that music is this universal language. You can travel anywhere in the world. If you learn music, you'll be able to play with somebody.
What
And
is?
that,
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
and to me, like that's a wonderful power of music. And jazz is one of those genres that's ubiquitous internationally as well. And the kids kind of light up, and we're hoping with this effort that we inspire the next generation of jazzers.
It sounds like a wonderful program, and how lucky we are to have it here in the Heartland. What do you know, the mission of the Heartland Song Network is to empower generative artists such as yourselves to be able to write songs, regardless of what the genre is. What is it that we are missing in generally in in this region, in this music ecosystem that we have here? What's the greatest need for generative artists like you to be successful, and not only to survive but to thrive here?
Um, I mean, this is just my opinion, but I think we're missing industry infrastructure. I think there's all the talent in the world in this area. It's one of the reasons I moved here. Your average musician here is just highly skilled, and I'm like truly honored to be one of them. Like, seriously, to practice jazz in Kansas City is the honor of a lifetime for me. But sometimes I feel like nobody knows about it, you know? And we don't have, like, even the recording industry infrastructure in town is nowhere near what it is in like Austin or Memphis or Nashville. And then when I was talking to you earlier about like PR, agents, things like that, we don't really have those things. What we have is a lot of live music and a lot of talent. We have no way to kind of like capture that and get it out.
I think that a lot of the problem resides in the fact that we're so fractured governmentally here. I mean, we straddle a state line. The metropolitan area has over 140 municipalities. You know, it's not like we have a music department at Kansas City, Missouri, that who's in charge of making sure that we are considered, or that they are considered, a music city. It just seems very fractionalized here, and that is one of the main reasons that we're held back from being more solidified in the infrastructure. It's just there's too many voices right now, and there needs to be more consolidation, more cooperation. Boy, does that sound familiar? In all things, you know what I mean? You know what I mean?
I
Um,
do.
well, I hope that you'll stay in touch with us with regard to the release of this record that you've been working so diligently on, and that if we can be of service to you in any way moving forward, we're only too happy to do that, you know, to share your events or whatever, you know, through our own social media, and to get the word out for you, because we're really lucky to have you here. And I've seen you play. I've been out to various venues over the years, and I hope you choose to stay here. I hope you aren't considering going back to Austin, or moving anywhere, and that you're here for the long haul. Any parting words for those that might be listening to us today that you'd like for us to make sure that gets out there?
I do have a couple upcoming projects,
Okay.
actually two of them are based in Austin. I'll be writing a silent film score, and we'll present it during Halloween in Austin. And then I'm going for a short run to play a couple venues in Austin, including the Elephant Room
Yeah.
come November. So, but I wanted to thank you for all that you do. I don't know if people understand how much behind the scenes work something like Heartland Song Network takes. And artists, when I'm talking about infrastructure, it's people like you that change that. So thank you
Well, I
for
appreciate that so much. And as one who has been to the Elephant Room in Austin, I'm looking forward to that. That might be a reason to get me in the car and get me down there to Austin
Oh
again.
yeah, come on down.
All
That'd be
right.
great.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you out and about.
All right, have a good
All right.
day.
Thanks, Jackie.
You can start anew. The worst part for me was always gonna be